to thank all of you for coming here and also thank NYU for lending us this beautiful space. I don't know how many of you were at our last event, but this is a very serious upgrade. So we're ecstatic to be here. And we have an incredible panel this time around. Not that we didn't last time, but I think this is even more incredible panel. So directly to my left is Lizzie Widdicombe from The New Yorker. You can read her latest story in the latest issue of The New Yorker magazine. Were you about to pull one out? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you all subscribe. It's only a couple $100 a year. But it's great. So we're ecstatic to have Lizzie. Jessica Pressler from New York Magazine, a senior editor there, who has also done some wonderful tech stories, the latest of which is about Airbnb. Steve Bertoni, a former colleague of mine at Forbes, whose latest story was about Tinder. It was the most kind of in-depth look at Tinder, also a Forbes cover story, which was your 9th, I believe. 9 cover stories, and an alumnus of the NYU journalism program as well. Yeah, correct. New fancy building. Yeah, and he's the reason that we got this for free, actually. So we're very grateful to Steven.
I named dropped you after.
And last but certainly not least is Max Linsky, who has been very kind to give us his time and to moderate this panel. There's literally nobody better in the city that I could think of to moderate this panel. He runs longform.org, which has been curating long-form journalism for 3 years now? 4 years?
4 years.
4 years.
Yeah.
Feels like 3. So he runs a podcast every week.
Yeah.
50,000 listeners listen to the podcast where he interviews long-form writers every week. Jessica was one of them. Am I getting this wrong?
No, you're getting that right.
Okay.
I don't tell people before they come. Jessica was on the show recently, and I didn't tell incredibly nervous and it was really awkward.
Yeah.
I didn't do that. I also did one recently. I don't know if
Go ahead.
Care about
No.
But I did one recently with Liz Messenger, and at the end of it, he was like, "How many people listen to this podcast? 4?" And then I told him, I was like, "No, man, actually, like quite a few. 50,000 people listen to it." I want assignments. So anyway, there you go.
Yeah. So if you ever go on his podcast now, you're aware of how many people listen to it. Also, just recently launched an app which is fantastic. Is the Longform app. So if you're here at a Longform tech journalism meetup, you should probably download this app as well. It's right up your alley, I promise. So with that, I will let Max take the wheel, and thank you again for coming.
Jessica, you got to grab your mic.
Hello.
It's very important.
I'm ready.
Hey guys, thanks for doing this.
Hi.
It's really nice to see you.
Thanks for having us.
I didn't really have you. It's really JJ's thing, but it's good to be here. He said that I was a good person to do this. That's not true, because I don't understand anything about business. But you guys do, and I look forward to asking you about business and business journalism.
Wrong.
Wrong? No?
No.
Is that have I already made an unfair assumption?
Don't ask me about business. Well, actually, maybe him.
Are you gonna, Steve? Are you gonna field all the business questions?
I wouldn't go on record with that either.
Well, that's actually true. So, Lizzie and Jessica, you guys both have written about all kinds of different stuff, and have just recently started to write about tech and what's going on in Silicon Valley and startups and stuff. So I'm interested in that transition, how you decided to do that. What are you curious about with this stuff? What's appealing to it? What are you trying to figure out?
I think, well, Jessica and I were just talking about how I think both of us are sort of generalists more than we are beat writers. So for me, that it does make me a little bit anxious sometimes when I write about certain fields, because, I feel like I don't have enough information. But but having just done one like long form thing about tech, and one kind of about the like it was about Soylent, but which is sort of, I guess, more about the culture of technology than it is about the actual technology. I think the appealing thing about tech is that unlike when you're, I don't know, writing about a celebrity who has a movie coming out or, you know, whatever, it's not, whatever you're writing about is not a story that's been told a million times before. Like the newness of it is what's exciting for everybody.
You mean like the Soylent guy hasn't been written about?
No, and what people are doing. I mean, you know, every single thing that's being done out there in the world and in Silicon Valley. I mean, they're just doing, it's all these new frontiers and new ideas, and it's very, it's the freshness of it and the newness of it, I think, is from a journalistic perspective what's really kind of fun.
It's interesting because the piece that you had in the New Yorker this week was about an agency called 10X, which is representing coders. So instead of like athletes or actors, they're representing programmers. And the way that the article was sort of pitched was, okay, here's a world, like a thing you understand, which is agents for actors and athletes, and now it's being applied to this world. So, like, what is different about writing about Soylent than, say, like Scooter Braun? Scooter Braun is the guy who like made Justin Bieber.
A lot of differences. I don't even know where to begin on that. Well, I think maybe writing for a general, I mean, I like coming at it writing from a general interest perspective rather than from a tech perspective. So what you have to do is, you know, if you're writing for your mom or your friend's moms, which I often am, working at the New Yorker, you know, how can my mother understand this? And so you say, hey, here, remember this thing that everyone understands? It's kind of like this, but, you know, and so
you feel like you're like in a way sort of like translating
Yeah.
this new world to people who are sitting, like, I don't know, in their couches in Connecticut trying to figure it out.
Yeah, I mean, given the outlet that I'm working for, I'm not like a tech industry journalist. I'm a general interest journalist. So, yeah, and I'm writing for, I think the New Yorker generally has an older readership, so that really raises the bar in terms of how much you need to explain. I mean, I can't say, hey, it's like Tinder for this, because, you know, it's like, hey, there's this thing on the phone where you flip and then date people, and then it's like that for this.
There was one like Ken Aletta piece, I think, on Business Insider, where there was like a full like 5 paragraphs on what a page view was, like the actual like technical understanding of like a web page will be loaded from a server, and that felt like one of those moments. How is it different for you writing for Forbes? How's like what's your audience?
Well, I would argue that you are a business writer, and I mean, my goal Forbes is a business magazine in a way, but it really is a magazine on capitalism, on entrepreneurship, on kind of innovation and risk. And my goal is to make a reader forget that they're reading a business. What is a business story? It's just, we all try to write kind of just great stories that maybe have a few revenue figures in it, but you know, we're not writing about investing, we're not writing about, you know, boring tech, because that's boring. So it's really about, business is about people. So we write about kind of founders and businesses and lessons that can be in there.
What makes
that agent story was fascinating, and that was my goal is to have a non-business reader read my story and like, that's a great profile, not that's a great business profile. And you talked about the whole marketplace. I mean, that's a business story. I mean, everything has money in it, so everything can be a business story.
One thing that's different about that story, the 10X story, and a lot of the ones that you've done is the 10X guy is doing pretty well, but sort of early in that idea. He's early in that business. It's not taking off. There's a bunch of like naysayers, and there's a long section in the piece that's kind of about people being like, oh, this is like never going to work. You write about like people who have made it often. Instagram founder, Tinder founder, Sean Parker, like people who have billions of dollars in their bank account. And I'm interested in how a profile, like how to make that great, how you make that compelling, especially when, especially when they've got a PR person maybe sitting there with them. Like, I'm interested in the access, but just how you think about how to make a piece like that great and compelling and not kind of watered down.
There's got to be, a good story needs to have drama. It has to have has an arc. You know, a lot of the stuff I do, I get to kind of hang, like with Sean Parker, I basically I flew out on a like last minute on a G4 he rented and spent like a week with him like running around like a maniac in San Francisco. Like that's great access, great color, but there's got to be some drama. Like at that time, I read that story. Sean was still like the Justin Timberlake character in people's minds, and he didn't have a lot of respect, and it was the party boy and stuff. Like, so that was a great drama. You want to read about this Sean Parker. No one wants to read about someone who's like, oh, I'm really smart. I went to Stanford. I made $1 billion. The end. That's a boring story. So there's got to be some kind of drama in terms of not like doesn't have to be like soap opera stuff, but some conflict, some giant thing, some giant obstacle. Sean Parker was thrown out of high school. He had a lot of this like crazy stuff. When the Social Network came out, he lived in the Peninsula Hotel like Howard Hughes for a month. Didn't go outside. Like and those kind of nuggets are really interesting. And now he was jumping to Spotify.
Right.
And Spotify was his kind of chance to fix the music industry that he broke at 18 at Napster. So there's some great kind of stuff in there.
And in that case, are you going out and seeing all those elements and saying, Sean Parker, that's going to be a great story, and pitching Sean Parker and writing a profile? How does that come about?
It all depends. A lot of it, like the Sean Parker thing took like 9 months of back and forth. He's very, like, you call his publicist and he'd be like, yeah, I haven't spoken to Sean myself in 3 months. Like, it's like that kind of stuff. But you do a pitch and then you get kind of in the door and then you see what happens. Like, you don't have a plan. You just get access and you have a general kind of thrust of a story. Like the Tinder story just changed in the middle of it. Like I was writing a profile that was supposed to come out in a month from now, being like, can Sean Rad, founder, survive in Barry Diller's IAC? In the middle of when I was literally on stage with him in Philadelphia, he got fired.
Right, that's like the best case scenario,
Yeah.
right?
So sometimes and there's great things. I mean, you just get lucky sometimes.
The amazing thing about that interview, I watched it today, the amazing thing about that interview is he had just been told he got fired, and he's so fucking cocky. It was amazing. Like, if I had just gotten a phone call that I had been fired, and then I stood up here, I'd just be like a sad sack crying. It'd be terrible. But that guy was just like, yeah, we're going to take over the world.
He's stone cold.
Yeah,
But no, it's a cockiness, and he said that he had such a crazy year that he was able to kind of like remove his brain from his body, which is kind of creepy. But basically, like he could like go on CEO mode, and they're playing CEO. Like it's not their normal. We were talking about Uber before. Like Travis plays Travis, right? So like Sean was playing Sean Rad, CEO of Tinder, and then I'm sure afterwards he was like fetal position on the bed in his hotel room.
Right, you actually wrote that he was fetal position
Yes.
on his bed in his hotel room. Is part of your job, maybe you can talk about...
No. That's too much access.
How do you break them, how do you get them out of CEO mode? Like when you did that story about Airbnb, yeah, yes. Like how do you, or is part of the goal to get them out of CEO mode? Is that possible?
That's definitely the ideal. I wouldn't say that those guys ever came out of CEO mode, but actually in Silicon Valley and with that story in particular, I find that really fascinating. Like I find the kind of cockiness and the fact that these guys live in like their own universe on the other side of the country, like, and they've been doing their own thing, and it's kind of like this, like it's a cult, and the way that they behave is actually like fascinating to me because I'm so outside of it, and the way that Silicon Valley CEOs speak is just really weird and fascinating.
Yeah, and it's great. As you said, like people say, oh, why don't you move to San Francisco? I think it's great to be a journalist in New York and kind of parachute into like that wacky world and parachute out because you can see it, right?
As a business journalist in general to be kind of an outsider. I think that when you're an insider, you get beaten down a little bit and you're supposed to know the lingo and you're supposed to like know all of this stuff, or people treat you like you're supposed to know all of this stuff, and it's hard for you to like, it's hard for your ego to like be like, I don't understand you, and so you stop saying it. And that happens to a lot of beat reporters. So yeah, I think it's good to like.
So
retain
part of the
that.
advantage is just that you get to like ask really dumb questions.
Yeah, just stupid is what you're supposed to be. Just think that. I like to think about Larry King a lot because Larry King never did any research on the people that went on the show. He just like showed up, and so whenever I'm like kind of underprepared because I have had stuff going on, I'm like just Larry King, just be like Larry King.
Has the bubble changed the way? I mean, I guess you've been writing about this stuff for a little bit longer than you guys have, but has that changed the way these stories take shape? The fact that there's...
Do we acknowledge the bubble now? Is that a agreed
Financial
upon?
bubble
Yes.
or like the Silicon Valley
Tech
bubble?
bubble.
Tech bubble. tech
I
bubble?
think it's hard because by the time, like, it's hard to gauge because, you know, there are all these startups and they all say they're worth $1 billion. And it's like, well, which one do we, it's hard from
$10 billion.
And I mean, this is an area where I do wish I had more financial sophistication, and actually like someone should just write a primer for just how to process these valuations. And then you know, by the time, and they move so fast because there's like the, you know, investor or whatever, the metabolism so fast. By the time you finally, if you're ahead of the game, then you're writing about this thing that's not stupid, but I don't know. There's some things that have been really hyped, and everyone writes a story. Oh, this is going to change the world. But then, like, you know, by the time Airbnb is worth $1 billion, like, it's worth $1 billion so fast. You know, it's like, how do you catch it at the right moment? I think it's almost like investing, except for you make very little money off it.
I think the bubble is
almost none even.
I think the bubble is awesome for journalists because it's creating like these. The show Silicon Valley, everyone in Silicon Valley loves it because it's just basically true. It's not even satire. It's kind of like, but I mean, with your Washio story, like that was a great story because of the bubble. Like, do we really need someone to like press a button and pick up our clothes? Like, that's what it's coming down to. But the valuations are great because people are getting greedy, and greedy creates great stories. And now all these people coming out of college, like the money hungry, like kind of like frat guys and sorority girls, are like want to do a startup because it's cool, and they have no idea. And it's really funny watching them kind of chase these ideas and, you know, kind of go after low-hanging fruit. And it's going to be a great fall. And the good news is when it falls, it's all super rich people, investors. It's not like the first one, we all got burnt, the NASDAQ. Like, it's all private money, so when it gets burnt, they can afford it. The VCs, you know, no one's going to cry over VC. They cry over...
I think one problem with the bubble is there's, like, hype, and, like, that's hard to see through and break through.
Isn't that kind of your job, though?
Yeah, but it's, like, it's hard.
Because the hype is just so powerful.
Hype is so blinding. No, I mean, it's just, I don't know. It's I don't know. It's part of a feature of writing about something that's a bubble.
Right. Yeah. Like, I had to be like to myself, like, okay, wait, laundry apps. The fact that there's 19 of them, that's objectively weird, right? Like, that's weird. And then I have all these people telling me, like, it's not weird. That's like actually a thing people really want. And you're like, no, but I think that might be strange. Like, I think that might be not normal.
And people forget about the hype. I think I wrote a story saying that way back in the day that $10 billion for Facebook was way overvalued, and now it's, I don't know, what, 200 million more, 200 billion. I mean, yeah. But everyone forgets, so it's all good. I don't have a crystal ball. So
I mean, part of what's so crazy about this stuff also is like you could have said like 100 billion or 300 billion. Everyone would have been like, oh, okay. That's so much fucking money. It's crazy. But part of the thing that I'm interested in is like, do you ever, when you're talking to these people and they're like, my company's worth 10 billion, tomorrow it's going to be worth 50 billion, are you ever like, the magazine that I work for, which has been around for decades as a venerated institution, is really struggling with its very small business model? Like, does that dynamic ever enter into those conversations at all? It's like,
I think that's like totally present in all media coverage of tech. There's this inherent skepticism because we're like, you're the worth more than this. It's
there's an inherent bitterness.
You're worth 100 New York Timeses.
Yeah.
Well, the Washington Post sold for how much was it? It was like
250 million.
Yeah, which is, I mean, yeah. We'll think of the tech companies that are valued at like 20 times that, or that are just valued at 250 million. I don't know what those would be, but like probably a lot of like buttons that maybe sort of.
Yeah, but the valuation is just, but the value is the value. Like, that's just because that's what the amount that the last dumbest investor put their money in. It doesn't mean they have, I mean, I find founders don't talk about the valuation much. Do you guys feel like that? They tend to like downplay it more than upplay it, I feel.
Yeah.
You were a banker before you were a journalist, right?
No. I was a glorified coffee fetcher on the stock exchange.
You had aspirations.
Yes, I worked at Merrill Lynch.
Okay, you had aspirations of being a banker.
But I was on the equity trading side, so different kind of stuff.
But
bankers very broad.
You moved from that to journalism. Is that at least allowed?
Yes.
Yeah. In those conversations, like when you're sitting there with Sean Parker and he's like, hey, let's get on my Gulfstream, and I stayed for a month in the Peninsula Hotel because I was sad. Like, do you ever think like, man, I should get into this thing? Like, do you ever want to jump the fence?
Well, Sean Parker is much, much smarter than I am, and he has ideas. That's why I'm a journalist. No, I don't know. The cool thing is, who knows? Like, everything changes so much. I don't know. But not like I have like a startup, like I'm doing it on the side.
I think
I'm not like JJ making the jump.
I think for the tech press, who are more like inner circle, that was a real, like I remember Michael Arrington and all these TechCrunch people, all the not traditional tech media, they immediately were like, oh, we're blurring the lines. Like, I mean, they immediately were like, oh, but I'm an investor too.
We're disrupting ethics.
Yeah, so, yeah, I mean, that was the real scandal. And so that's a murky territory in covering tech. But traditional media, we are bound by traditional ethics, for better or worse. So I mean, yeah.
You asking like, do we want to jump to work for a startup or work for like PR for? You'd be a good publicist for Airbnb.
That's what I'm saying. Is like at some point with like you're like talking to someone, you're like, this company is going to be worth $250 billion. I am quitting this magazine job, and I will be your PR person. Like, give me some points.
But then you have to do one thing all the time, and it's like we get to like go and talk to the people who are doing the cool thing, and then we see them like fuck up and like cry in the peninsula, and then we just move on to the next one. We kind of get to experience all of that.
Here's the other interesting part of that dynamic to me is that you've got these companies that whether or not they're really worth what they're worth had this sort of skyrocketing thing. People trying to pour money into them. There's all this hype and talk and excitement and momentum around them, but they still need you guys. They still need the press.
That is a fascinating thing. It's true.
Yeah, Uber turns out. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I've been waiting to. I don't know.
They care apparently.
Yeah, quite.
Why in God's name do they? Yeah,
but they need it, right? So why do you think they? Why do they need that story from you on the cover of Forbes?
Because they need people's trust. So I guess the media is a thing still.
Yeah, it's a good thing. It's good. It's good marketing. It's good for them. People have egos, and to be on the cover of a magazine with a positive headline is a good thing. They can.
Yeah, and if you're like 40 and you grew up with magazines.
Well, no, but also like these valuations and investors. Like, I mean, since we're saying there's so much of this pricing is arbitrary, it turns out media hype, I think, probably has real financial implications.
So how do you guys navigate that? If you know that part of the reason that you're getting the access you're getting is to help them hype themselves, how do you navigate that?
Well, that's the press, right?
That's the perfect scenario, because that's when they make the fatal error of trusting, of letting you in.
But it's part of the deal. We have the flashlight and we shine it on people, and that's. They have a good story. Yeah, we're not writing it's going to be a fair story, but it's not going to be a positive story.
But that's the dirty bargain people make with the press,
Can I just say the Washio, the laundry app that I wrote about, which they, you said that I made fun of them brutally. I was like, I'm making fun of human beings for needing laundry apps. I think we're really weird. But they loved the story, and they got $10 million in funding after that in our next round.
It's probably
it's just shamelessness. There's like an amazing level of shamelessness.
It's mutually beneficial.
Yeah, well, we make people rich, and we come here and get free beers. That's how that's how it works.
Let's talk about Uber. This thing that came out this week. Uber's going to start tracking journalists, or that was like floated.
It's very flattering.
I know. I was kind of like, I'm sad that they're not going after me.
I know. Please, opposition researcher. That'd be amazing. Like someone's job is like.
That's really important. No.
The opposition researcher.
That's what you jump the fence for. Yeah.
If you're going to go dark, go real dark.
Well, it's amazing that they would have such a terrible PR. I don't know. Is that a bad PR? Are they in a bad PR moment? Is it bad when?
Well, I think they have become fatally obsessed with their own PR. I mean.
Yeah, hiring David Plouffe is pretty amazing.
I mean, the fact that they are obsessing over it so much is fun. It's weirdly self-sabotaging, but I mean, it came from them caring so much, which.
Especially that Pando Daily was their #1 target. That's like.
What does that say to you?
I mean, that's the thing.
It's not exactly the New Yorker.
Well, the reason they care about their PR is because the biggest hurdle to their business model is regulation, and that is set by people who read the newspapers or whatever, maybe.
Yeah, no, definitely.
But they don't read Pando Daily, so I don't know why. So that obviously it led to an unhealthy obsession with like self-Googling, obviously, or you know.
Self-Googling is, I feel like that's a worldwide phenomenon. That's not.
But this is very bad PR. I mean, I think Uber always has kind of a trust issue. You're being picked up by a stranger in a car, and if they're like executives are saying they want to like drag, they're being secretive, they want to drag journalists' personal lives to the mud and say like they'll never know it's us. That kind of hurts that trust issue. I mean, when you're dealing with people in motion and strangers, like you need to be like Disney, not Darth Vader.
It feels to me like tech is unique in that kind of like hero-villain dynamic. So part of the story with Uber is like they're actively trying to, and they're saying in the press like, we're not doing a good enough job of telling a quite real story about all the ways that we are changing the world and being very helpful and doing all this great stuff. Because, and they basically say this, like there's a great profile in San Francisco Magazine this week, or last week, of the CEO, and it quoted several people in the company being like, he is a tremendous dick. You know, like he is a huge asshole. But this company is amazing. And I feel like tech is rare in that way, that these pieces can both sort of make people heroes and villains at the same time. Like you can puff people up and take them down at the same time. It's not a question, that's just a thing.
Yeah, I mean, that's the whole like cult thing. They kind of just really, really believe their own hype in that world. Like I was in like Portland, Oregon recently, and I went to see if I can get an Uber, and it said something like, you can't have an Uber here because this city is really behind the times. It was just like a really snotty, like weird way of saying it. And I was like, oh, okay, but that's kind of how they are. And you kind of can't go out into the world and be like, we're going to change the world if you're going to be a dick. It's kind of weird. It's fascinating.
But the whole culture of disruption means that they idolize dickish. Being a disruptor doesn't mean being a nice, necessarily friendly person, and everyone knows that Steve Jobs was not necessarily a nice person.
They're also going up against like the Portland Cab Authority, which is like these cab things are the most corrupt, dirty, you name it. So.
I think what he's frustrated about is like, why is he not cast as the good? I mean, it's like Godzilla versus King Kong. It's like, oh yeah, who are you rooting for? The tech moguls or like the corrupt like cab cartel? I was like,
yeah, there's no real underdog.
I think the journalists are quite happy to villainize both. Is the sad part from
Have any of you guys ever written a story about a company that failed? Have you guys ever?
You mean after the fact?
Yeah, like post hype. Would Forbes ever write a story?
We tried. We tried to do like even anonymous, like kind of a like TikTok, like what happened. One company I wrote about got like 30 million in funding, and then like 2 months later, like just folded. And I wanted to talk to like the founders about like what actually happened, but they didn't want to do it.
Shocking turn of events. Didn't want to talk about that.
What was that NYU like Facebook alternative thing? I feel like that got a lot of hype. And diaspora. What happened to diaspora? I don't know.
I just had to compare this sort of diaspora. So one of the founders of that, the wonderful project, took his own life. It was really upsetting. And there's a book that was just written about it by a New York Times reporter. And there's a review about it in the Sunday New York Times book review. And in that half-page review, it doesn't mention that.
Yeah, because I read that review and it didn't mention that. That's really weird.
Yeah, that's fine. If anyone has questions, you should ask them. That's totally. I don't know how we're doing on time, but. Oh, we have a lot of time. Oh, great. Okay, we're not ready for questions yet.
This is hour 104 here.
No, but seriously, I mean, there's not a lot of people here. If you guys have questions, this is we're all a family here.
Well, I guess the Tinder story was kind of a failure story in a way.
Yeah, I mean,
but it wasn't like an explosion. But it's kind of Mr. Super CEO then taking down several pegs.
That one was tricky too because the reason that he was taken down and the reason he was able to be taken down was for a very sort of like specific and kind of intricate financial arrangement that they have with IAC, which must have been kind of challenging. That's one of those moments where you really have to get into the kind of like guts of the valuation stuff and the cap table and the way all of this stuff works. Just from like a writing perspective, how do you approach something like that?
You got to kind of just keep it breezy. Like pretend you're writing for your 12-year-old nephew kind of thing. It's not a Wikipedia page about like what actually happened. You want to get the idea across, but keep people reading. Because if you get way too in the field, if you get into the weeds, people just stop it. If it bores you, it's going to bore your reader.
What are you guys surprised by in these stories that you've been doing? Like, I feel like we've been dealing sort of with the some of the kind of like stereotypical things about tech in that world. But I mean, you've done 9 of these stories, cover stories for Forbes. You're writing all the time. Like, are there things that surprise you about the people in this world, about covering them, about how open people are willing to be? What surprises you about it?
I think in general, I mean, we're kind of, we're making fun of all these people, but a lot of them are, crazy risk takers. They're really smart. They're also really lucky. But surprising is the trend that, back in the day, like, so Forbes covers billionaires. That's kind of our bread and butter. You look back like 10 years ago, and the average age was like, 45, 50, 60, because these people were making physical goods and they had to kind of build factories and take capital. Now you have someone like a Kevin Systrom or Sean Rad that just has like 10 people in a little space with computers, and they can have $1 billion company in a year. So that trend is incredible. And also, we write about these people. Some of these people are 25, 26, 27 years old. I mean, how would you feel if you were in charge of a company in this spotlight? I mean, it doesn't not that age matters, but some of these people are babies and we expect them to be like a Jack Walsh from GE, but they're just, just graduated from college with no training. Some people they have employees and they've never been an employee themselves. So it's very, I don't know, it's interesting.
It feels like connected to sports. I mean, that's like athletes are also, in their early 20s and have this
Pop music. So.
Yeah, exactly. Tons of money and tons of attention and no real training for how to navigate that.
I would say in general, as much as we like to rag on tech, and there are, like, the people on the investor side, I don't know, I think they probably, maybe some of them are great. They maybe deserve some, I don't know, and especially all the people who are sort of shoving capital into this and trying to, like, make a quick buck. But, like, the actual technologists and the culture of that, to be honest, it's really quite, talking to these fine young people is, I think it's pretty amazing. And actually I'm kind of glad that these people are ruling the world. I like it better than when the titans of finance were ruling the world. And I think it's kind of amazing that all these people are with their Harvard MBAs, and they really don't have the skills to to just kind of trade that for money. The fact that now, and the culture of, the open source, all of the culture, the hacker culture is kind of an awesome culture. So in terms of its values, it's a little bit closer to the values of journalism than, they care about what you do, and they actually don't care about, they care about cred more than they care about money in a lot of ways, some of them. The hacker culture and the people who are really the technology people they're a real breath of fresh air, I find.
Is there, you've written, I think, 2 sort of tech pieces and a bunch of business stuff. Are there more tech stories you're interested in telling?
Yeah, if anyone has any good ideas, I'm kind of looking for one right now. Is
that your beat now? Is that what you're doing?
Not really, because I find that when I do a story for 3 months or whatever, I just never want to hear about this topic again, for a little while. So I hope I don't.
You get 3 months to work on a story?
Well,
Wow.
Not this one, but I have, yeah. But I'm slow.
What about you, Jessica?
What about me? What I find surprising?
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with Lizzie. It's actually really inspiring to talk to these young kids who are just going for it, and it's fascinating to me the way that they are just kind of super motivated and have these huge ideas, and they have no, second thoughts about maybe I can't be Steve Jobs. It's just the confidence is really inspiring, and it's cool. It's neat.
Are there
and insane? It's been
are there other parts of this universe that you want to explore? You've also written like a couple of pieces now, and but have written about all kinds of things in the past. Is there more of this story that you want to tell?
Yeah, I mean, probably. I think like people who are doing like weird scientific, environmental like, things are kind of interesting, and creating their own little utopias in the desert and all of that. The kind of stuff that they're doing with the money now is kind of interesting to me.
How so? What do you mean?
Well, I mean, like the creation of the utopia that Tony, how do you say his last name? The Zappos guy is
Tony
doing,
Hsieh.
and Shea, right, in Vegas, and there's like another group of guys with like their own little island, in Canada, and so that's kind of interesting.
You know, to your point, it's great. Like the Wall Street people and lawyers are they buy fine art and that kind of stuff. These people, like Jeff Bezos, is building like a clock in the desert that is going to tick until like the Earth explodes, which is wild. You know, there's
It's
wild.
amazing. Yeah,
And
10,
like you know,
he's
like,
spent I don't know how much, 20 million or 30 million. It's
something
like
crazy.
It's like not
nuclear-proof.
insignificant fraction of the Washington Post has been spent on this clock.
And like Peter Thiel really thinks he's going to find a way to like live forever. And you know, there's all the stuff Google's doing, and just even Richard Branson's not tech, but he has and Elon Musk, private space agencies. I mean, that's crazy. I mean, you know, that's not like buying a Greenwich farm and having horses and buying like a few Rothkos. Like they're taking that shit to
I just find
space.
that so exhausting.
Cool.
Like I'm gonna start a space company. I just like I'm so exhausted at the thought of that. Like I can barely.
Where do you see it going? Where how do you see it evolving? What do you think your interest will be following?
So what do you mean by it?
Tech, your kind of journalism. Like if you are following your own curiosity, you're looking for stories, and you end up writing a lot about people who are sort of at the height of this world. How do you think that world is going to evolve, and what are you interested in covering going forward?
If I knew, I'd be much wealthier than I am. I don't know. I think we are people are always asking, what do you see that's cool? There's nothing. I think we're kind of in it won't last long, but I think we're in a lull. I feel it's a lot of like people trying to be making us lazier with apps and kind of middlemen stuff, like the Washios, and we're doing our 30 under 30 list for Forbes, and all the nominees are like 17 different food delivery companies in San Francisco. Like, you know, it's not like better than Seamless. It's the same kind of thing. And I feel like the companies doing cool things you already know about. It's like the Googles, it's the Apples, the Teslas, all that sort of stuff. So I think there's going to be a giant bump soon, and it's going to come out of nowhere. So I don't know. But right now I'm kind of bored with the new stuff.
And where do you go looking for the things that might be interesting?
You just kind of read a ton, and you just talk to as many sources as you can, as like, you know, kind of like what's exciting you, what's worrying you, and, you know, hopefully it sprouts up from there. But it's always kind of you're always looking, you're always kind of scouting the next thing.
You talked about Washio raising $10 million after your story.
Which sounds like nothing compared to what we've been talking about.
It sounds like a lot to me. What are the reactions to, like, what was the reaction to that Sean Parker piece or the Tinder piece? What kind of effect do those stories have in the long run?
For the people involved, or for I think in both cases, both Sean's were happy with the story. They thought it was fair. It kind of blew some it blew some misconceptions off of their personas. And I think, you know, for Sean Rad, it's still kind of up in the air. And, you know, Sean Parker got, I think, some legitimacy. Like, the cool thing with Forbes is, like, being on the cover of Forbes still means something. Even Sean, who, like, destroyed the music industry with Napster, Mr. Digital, when I sat down with him, the first question he asked was, will this be in the magazine, and could it be the cover? Like, there's still some magic in, like, framing that thing on glass and giving it to grandma or grandpa kind of stuff. So I don't know. I don't know what I think they enjoy. Like, Sean Parker took out Facebook ads for the article when it came out,
Really?
which is kind of really weird.
I wonder if Sean Parker has to pay for those ads.
And it was also his Twitter bio was just a link to my story, which made me nervous. Like, ooh, did he pull the wool over my eyes?
If you like it a little bit too much, you're like, oh, did I do it wrong?
But it wasn't like but it wasn't a puff piece, so I don't know. I have no idea. He's an interesting dude. So we'll see. But I think it raised their profile, and I don't know.
We got this email today. We posted that San Francisco Magazine piece on Kalanick and the CEO of Uber, which is, was in my mind, not at all.
Uber emailed you?
No, a reader emailed. this long screed about like, I don't come to longform.org to find puff pieces. And I thought it was like a pretty harsh piece, and still it was interpreted because it was like kind of talking about, it was talking about Uber's best case scenario and Uber at its best and also Uber at its worst. It's interesting.
That's why you don't read comments.
Yeah.
Seriously.
Yeah, it's funny. Like every New Yorker article, there's always like a million comments. There's like, why does this person get a New Yorker profile? Like, why does this person get to be written about in the New Yorker? Like, just by putting the name in the text, we're like endorsing it. It's like, I don't know. It's weird.
Do the people that you've written about, do they have the same Forbes effect where it's like they want to like?
Well, I
cut it down and
did.
give it to
Like,
their grandma?
I wrote about Vice, and then like a year later or whatever, they were then valued at like $2 billion. And I feel like that the profile that we gave was probably not, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure they could have done it anyway, but gave me pause. It's like, I know, yeah.
You weren't hard enough on them? I think now is actually a time that if people have questions, they could ask them. Sure.
Yeah, this question is for Lizzie. What about your profile of the Bustle founder? What effect did that have? I thought it was a tremendous piece.
Thank you. Actually, that was a. I love that piece, and I love the way Brian responded to it too. Well, that was a piece where it was kind of like, I didn't like spend a lot of time. Like, actually, that was really funny because I think that piece, when it came out, all of a sudden this narrative developed on the blogs where they were like, the top 10 burns in Lizzie Widdicombe's article. And I don't even know who the heck comes up with this. But like one, 12-year-old blogger came up with that concept, and then like they were all like, ooh, burn. She really burned him. I don't know why, because they wanted to attack him. So they were searching my article for evidence of burns. But I guess that's an example of where you just, especially with someone like Brian, you just let his statement speak for himself. You don't, and I think for me to write an article being like, this guy sucks so much would be a little, like,
Gilding the lily.
yeah, it's unnecessary. He actually, because he doesn't suck, he's a complicated person. But he's a great example. I love his attitude to press. It was a little bit like Sean Parker. It was very much not the Travis Kalanick model of when people are like, you just wrote a whole article about them and they're so pissed about like one little line, But I think Brian is like, he has an ego of steel, and like he's still, he actually like still emails me and like wants to, so
I think like it's true of all business journalism that it's kind of like high school, and these people were all like big time nerds, and they're gonna react like a big time nerd would. Like they either like are super happy that they're even getting press, or they're like super mad that they're not cool anymore.
And the internet loves, like we were saying before, like the burn stuff. The internet loves like kind of the Gawker Valleywag kind of snark for no sake at all. Like I'd much rather play it straight and let the person themselves like kind of dig themselves in a hole with quotes and be more nuanced than having to like dig put the dagger myself. Like you got to be, they want like obvious like bang the drum sort of stuff with snark, but I'd rather just play it cool and let the person dig their own grave, so to speak.
yeah, or it should at least be like it shouldn't be too gratuitous. But like I was gonna like Daniel Zaleski, the features editor at the New Yorker, I remember him saying about Ian Parker, like, who is this wonderful writer who all of his pieces are so nuanced and they're so subtle, really, in tonally subtle, and it's kind of the ideal. But like the comments on all of his profiles of like Alec Baldwin and like I don't know, all these people. Half the comments are like, what a puff piece, and half the comments are like, oh, what an asshole, like what a hit, that was such a rude hit piece. So it's literally split down the middle. And it's funny because people aren't really villains or, so it actually, I think he does a good job of capturing the complexity of people, which is hard.
Part of the pressure of the people that you guys are writing about is that you three also happen to be writing the definitive pieces on them quite often. Like this, that's the longest someone's going to spend with Brian for quite some time, I think.
It's an interesting question.
No, you don't think so?
The longest someone's going to spend with Brian. That's a great question.
A reporter.
Yeah, reporter.
But no, I do think that
Yeah.
like maybe part of that pressure is that you guys are the ambition of the stories that you write is to be this sort of definitive piece on somebody. That is the definitive Sean Parker profile, right? So I wonder if part of that anxiety is not just being in the press, but this being like that piece, or maybe that's not something they're conscious of. I don't know.
Well, weird thing is, especially when you deal with these successful people, billionaires, like for that little moment, you like that week or 2 weeks or whatever you're going to press, you have like power over somebody. I mean, they're trusting you with their name, right? Like I did a cover story with Carl Icahn, and I'm like, holy shit! I'm actually more powerful than Carl Icahn for like a week. And with that comes trust. Like at the end of the day, like these are people, and sometimes you meet their family and their kids, and it doesn't mean you give them a pass, but you're not out there to kind of just give them a hatchet job because you can. So I mean, I think when people open up their world to you and you write a profile, like you're going to do like a fair, honest, like really thorough job. But at the same time, there is a trust involved, and you kind of have to handle that person's name kind of with some care. You don't drop it for no reason. That's kind of what I think.
It's well put. Oh, yeah, you were here. Yeah, sure.
So, question for all three of you. Question for all three of you. What was the favorite piece you worked on and why? And it's not limited to tech. It's just because you three are already up there, so.
I hate everything I write, so I can't.
What was your least favorite then?
I can't say that, 'cause then somebody will read it and I'll be more embarrassed.
In terms of like experience or like how it came out, like the reporting experience or just the people, or what kind of favorite?
Either one.
I once went undercover in a Las Vegas club as a busboy for like a week, and it almost killed me. But
You're doing least favorite now?
no, that was my most favorite.
Oh, okay.
Because I'm kind of a germaphobe, and it got me over a lot of fear. So it was good. It was the bank and the Bellagio, and no one knew, so I was like the new busboy, and they were like hazing me the entire time. But that was a good experience. And it wasn't writing about a person, so it was actually like freeing, because you're writing about it was like an entrepreneur piece, like showing how these people made so much money, and it was kind of cool.
Interview and get the job and everything?
Well, the manager knew, so they kind of slipped me in, but like the crew, like just kicked my ass the entire time. It ended when I got cut glass, and then someone threw up all over my station. So.
And you were like, "Fuck you guys, I'm out."
No. Then they came out and they brought out a bottle of champagne with sparklers, and they announced like Steve Bertoni's actually a reporter, and it was
Horrible.
And then all those guys were like, "Someone's got to clean up this puke."
No, in Vegas, they actually have to have a hazmat team and come clean it up. Yeah, that's a new little fact.
I won't say it's my favorite, but it is my favorite. In the experience, not the story, but the experience of doing a profile of Taffy Gevinson, the something special girl who we all like really respect. She was, I guess, yeah. I did a profile of her when she was 14, and it was an amazing experience. I just because at that time she was a fashion blogger. She was the fashion blogger she was a 14-year-old from Chicago, and people were reading her blog. But it was just it just really showed me how age really doesn't matter. Like if you're when people are cool people, it was a powerful experience.
The experience is always, I think it's
Yeah.
always really
It was
fun.
wonderful.
Unless you're interviewing Alexander Skarsgård, who's like a really terrible interview. But he's Swedish. I think it's actually a Swedish thing. I don't know if anyone here is Swedish, but they're really not good at interviews. But it's like really fun to go out and talk to people and ask like incredibly nosy questions, because that's your job. Like you just get to be super nosy. I love it. It's great.
Yeah. The writing's the hard part.
Yeah, the writing sucks.
Transcribing is the worst.
Hi, I'm an entrepreneur myself, so it's really interesting to hear you guys' perspectives. And it's very funny because I was just in the Silicon Valley. I was in a part of the StartX incubator program, so it was really interesting to see the comparison between the entrepreneurs there and versus here. So it's also from my experience, most of the entrepreneurs that I met through StartX or Y Combinator, they're all very nice, very open. So I do wonder if you guys realize there's a bit of like a trend over, as soon as they start getting fame and people started, their egos start to grow like crazy. And do you guys kind of follow the process from, when they started, were they like really nice people, and then they started, having huge egos and the fail and everything?
That would be a good story idea.
Yeah, no, it would. I was actually thinking, did you guys read that story? There was like a story about like this Google executive who like overdosed on heroin, and this like prostitute was there, and you're like, oh wow, like that's going on, like that's what these guys are like. There's definitely like a crazy underworld going on out there. Like that's the thing about like, you're like, everybody's really nice and open, but like maybe it's because I'm from the East Coast. I'm just like, I'm very suspicious of that. I think that you can't have no negative thoughts ever. It's too strange.
When they're young, yeah, they're lovely. So at what point does it go sour? It's a good, I don't know.
But a lot of them do stay very normal and kind of humble people, I feel.
I think you have to try so hard. I think like extreme wealth is like such a corrupting disease. Like it just really messes you up. It's super isolating. It's like a very strange thing that happens.
People say yes to you all the time. Like, you're just trying to buy yes people. So if you have like a stupid idea, no one's like, that's retarded. I'm sorry, that's stupid. And it's tough to be like in that bubble of like everything you say is right and you're a genius, and people stop seeing you as a human. They see you as like a dollar sign. Like they're like, oh, they don't see, hey, that's Travis. It's like, oh, Travis, his company's worth $18 billion, which is kind of very dehumanizing, I think, right?
But as I was talking to these kids last night who are like super rich for various Gossip Girl kind of reasons, they're like, I'd rather cry in a Bentley than cry on a bus.
They sound great. They sound like great friends.
Yeah.
So I worked on Wall Street Stock Exchange, always writing on the side. It was kind of like a passion thing. I got laid off in 2006, and then I actually applied here to NYU, and they had this great program that was, I didn't want to do it at first, but they talked me into it. It's called the BER program, and it's half journalism, half MBA, so to speak. So you come here during the day, do writing, and then in the evening you go to Stern and kind of learn accounting and that sort of stuff. But they had an incredible alumni network with, because each class is like 15 people or less, and they give you great internships, and I interned at Reuters, I interned at Forbes, and Forbes kept me, so it's from this building, basically, so that was my path.
I worked at a newspaper in Philadelphia and a magazine and was a freelancer, and New York Magazine is my longest held job, for sure.
I started out as an assistant at the New Yorker after college, and I think I was sort of prepared for that by doing internships at the Daily News and at the Observer, which were places that they let the interns write, so that was helpful. But now I feel like that model's kind of, it's like, it's already like, I feel like now, maybe our models for getting into the business are kind of like outdated.
I blogged for a little while. I blogged for like 3 years at New York Magazine.
Okay, well, yours is relevant.
Yeah, these days, journalism is a great second job. Like if you have some expertise in something else.
Oh my God, like Atul Gawande, I'm like, he's a surgeon, and then he just writes magazine articles on the side. What a dick.
Yeah, exactly, right? show off, it's retarded.
Yeah, it's like he does it while he's also a surgeon. Yeah, it's like,
I'm just going to toss this one off, and it's going to be brilliant.
Yeah.
But
that's a great path if you guys want to do that.
But yeah, if you're like an entrepreneur, and then if you want to switch gears and be a journalist, you'd be a pretty good entrepreneur writer because you've lived it and you know what the struggles are. Once you've lived something, you know more about it than anyone reading something. So.
But yeah, getting paid to do journalism is hard, so I don't know.
Yeah.
For questions, if you guys can wait for one of us with the microphones to come around, that'd be great. Thank you.
Yes, I was wondering if you could elaborate a little bit maybe on the difference of doing a profile of Carl Icahn versus doing a profile of like Sean Parker, like 27-year-old billionaire who doesn't even know he's worth $1 billion, and the guy who's 70 and been doing this forever and slowly took chunk by chunk to get there.
It's at the end of the day, it's still. I mean, Carl Icahn is like the most entertaining person in the entire world. It's a pleasure to hang out with him for a few hours. It's the same thing. It's a person. Like when you write a profile, it's about the person first and kind of like what they're going through, what's at hand, what the drama is, and so there's really no difference. It's just like a great experience to kind of jump a couple decades back and forth. And as a journalist, it's amazing to kind of see that new scenery. But actually, both Sean and Carl don't have publicists. Like Sean didn't have a publicist there, and Carl does his own PR. So it was actually really, really fun. It wasn't like you were doing something with a Wall Street guy where there's 7 people in the room with recorders and typing everything he said. Like, Carl was just Carl, and so that was awesome. So it was actually very similar. And a lot of publicists are really good and like a lot of good help. I did a story with Sheldon Adelson when he was just giving money to Newt Gingrich, and you would think he'd have all his publicists. He had a guy in the room, but the guy was super cool and just sat there and basically like played on his BlackBerry the entire time. I feel like fashion publicists are the biggest hawks.
Oh, Hollywood publicists.
Hollywood publicists, yeah.
The worst.
Fashion, close second. It's hard to decide.
Yeah, it'd be easier to like interview Putin than it would be to interview like Angelina
celebrity
Jolie.
profiles is the worst. Is the worst thing. Yeah.
Thinking about Sarah Lacy's asshole culture Uber piece that kind of exploded and was incredibly personal, is that something you guys ever struggle with when you're writing, is incorporating your personal morals or personal values into the pieces that you're writing? Like if you're writing about something that you morally disagree with, is that something you ever struggle with?
I don't think that's our job. I mean, it all depends on what kind of writer you are and stuff, but if what they're doing is legal, and then I guess your job is to report. It's not to be. I'm not a columnist. I'm not like a preacher. So I try to just say, like, you throw it out there, like they're making money from this. This is how they do it, and let the reader decide if it's being like unfair, if something should be changed. That's kind of how I see it.
I think the piece should be consistent with your like personal, moral, and ethical views, like. Because you can kind of smell it when, I don't know, like we were just talking about what it takes to be a salesman, like going in there and saying something you do not believe at all. Like, it's pretty much the opposite of journalism. Like, you have to feel honest about it. That's a good, like, guide to what you're doing. But in terms of being really political, I think maybe the type of people who choose this type of job are people who are more agnostic, or at least I am, like, journalism that has a real political agenda, if it's like feature journalism, is generally not very fun to read. But if you're that type of person, like, it's probably self-selecting that way. I mean,
I feel like I always, I actually feel a little bit differently, that I always, like, it sneaks in, like, not like, but I always have like a struggle. Like, I kind of go in agnostic, and then I have feelings one way, and then I have feelings another way, and then I'm like, I don't know what I think.
It's a roller coaster.
Like, oh, that's terrible, and I'm sweating, and I'm like grabbing my hair, and it's like, it's.
Do you have it figured out when you start to write?
Not always. No.
And also, I think all three of us pitch our stories. It's not like I'm being assigned. It's not like I'm a vegan and like, oh, write a story about a meatpacking plant and how it's great. Like, I feel like we pick stories that we're interested in, so we're either like think what they're doing is great, or what they're doing is like bad, and that's kind of the motivation. So like you said, self-selecting, I think that's kind of comes out naturally. Like, you wouldn't want to do a profile on someone that you hate and then try to be good to them. You probably wouldn't pitch that story.
but I used to really struggle with that actually early on when I was, there would be pressure from the editors to be like, well, is this a good person or not? Is this a good company or not? And I'd be like, I don't know, it's both. Yeah, and like you're saying, like by the time you have a long form feature piece come out, you've been through like every stage of like, I mean, you've loved them, you've hated them, you've like been, so it is hard to remember, to figure out where you stand. I think it gets really disorienting.
Yeah, terrible. I went to Airbnb, like I'm a huge fan, like I love the service. I think it's really great. And then I was forced to like think about kind of these giant effects that it has on cities and on the world, and how like maybe they're not really considering that, and that's a little bit disturbing, and it was an emotional roller coaster.
Yeah, I think that's more like kind of the question is like halfway through your piece, if you realize halfway through like, oh shit, like I don't really.
But at the end, always, you're just like, I'm gonna not have feelings, and I'm just gonna like write it without feelings, right? Like at the end, like that's the answer, like to not have feelings.
It's our job to go out there and give an accurate, most objective story we can, and let the reader decide like if Airbnb is great or if it's bad or if there's some ills and some good things too.
It's like here's this. I went through all the emotions for you.
But you're in that, like you're on deadline and you're kind of winging it, and if you had 10 years to think about the significance of Airbnb, like at some point you got to make a call, and they're definitely, I don't know about you guys, but yeah, we might have alluded to them, some stories that like I'm like, God, I wish I had done that one differently, In fact, especially,
or had 2 more pages to kind of explain.
Or I wish I had been harsher, or I wish I had been nicer, or
Because so many of the things that you guys are writing about are both great and evil at the same time, is a good outcome that the comments or the reaction is polarized in the way that you guys were talking about, like that half the people are like, this is a huge puff piece, and the other half is like, this was too much of a hit piece. Like, is that a way that you sort of help figure out that you like played it down the middle?
Since I was a blogger, I just don't read internet comments anymore, but I would say yes.
In whatever format the internet comments are going to take. I mean, that's what I'm saying is like, ultimately, do you want the reaction to a piece to be split down the middle?
What's funny about internet comments is people misread the story. Like they obviously have no reading comprehension, or maybe they didn't read it, and then they get really angry about something that they made up, that like this story said this and this and this, and then 50 other people are like, I can't believe the New Yorker said, like no one has actually read the initial. So people get really angry about their misreadings of things, is like the majority of comments and reader letters, I think. So if someone just really took the time to actually read something, I don't know.
And it's different organizations have different like comment, like Forbes has just like really bad, nasty comments sometimes, but like the New Yorker has like much more engaged in bad comment. It's just interesting the different groups.
Ours are the craziest of all.
It's funny, like if you read like the New York Post comments and then you read New York Post is the worst. But like it depends on where the story gets aggregated too. Like I've had a story.
Ours are less racist than New York Post.
I'm sorry.
Ours are less racist.
Less racist, yeah. Like I've had stories, like the Sheldon Adelson story I wrote about Newt Gingrich got on like Drudge Report, and I spent 3 days just deleting like racist comments the entire time. Yeah. It was just like, so it depends on where it gets disseminated from.
Yeah.
It's weird. Oh yeah.
Wow. Yeah, we don't, the comment filtering system, but sometimes, the other thing about the internet is, if you accidentally wrote like a huge puff piece, people are going to call you out or whatever. I don't know. It kind of does keep us accountable.
I guess that was the question, is not forget the comments, but how do you judge the success of a piece?
The ideal reaction is that people get what you were trying to say.
Yeah, the ideal
reaction. Oh, thank God.
Traffic.
That doesn't happen
number.
much, but yeah.
Traffic engagement, and also how much, like the real comments are what the bloggers say. So it's not like what, like the random crazy person in prison writes in the bottom of your thing. It's kind of like maybe how New York, right? It's fun, right? It depends on what New York Magazine says, or it depends on what like Valleywag says, or depends on what VentureBeat. Like sometimes when you get all those people pitching in, at least that means you're creating a conversation and entertainment, and that's what we really do at the end of the day, is entertainment.
Yeah, if somebody reads it and comes away with what you thought you wrote, what you thought you were saying, that's always gratifying. Doesn't happen very much, but.
All right. Well,
we bring the special guest. The special guest.
Oh, the special guest.
Jeez.
God, you do it.
Okay, we have a special guest. It's the man who had an Airbnb in his home that turned into an orgy.
But he wasn't there. He was not there.
But he was not there. He arrived home to find an orgy in his Airbnb, and it was a person. It was the like big beautiful.
He's also a comedian.
He's the source of a famed New York Post story, but this is the man himself.
Yeah, and I just feel like we should all hear the story. We have questions.
Thank you. It's
right, so tell us.
It's the first time anybody's ever described me as a man, so that's nice. How's it going, Jews? Yeah, I guess I'm a stand-up comic in New York. I run a tech startup in Tel Aviv called Friend or Fraud. We identify fake accounts online and verify identities. And so the stuff you're talking about, Uber and everything, we're sort of behind trying to fix that. And what do you want, the orgy story?
Yeah, I want the orgy.
That's the one.
Stuff.
Okay. So I was meeting with a reporter from the Daily News and about this doctor that poisoned me. It was just in the Post last week. Now if I do something, it ends up in the, like I get an email from the Post or the Daily News or a text. I'm like, crap, here we go again. They're nice. They're friendly people. They just have a sharper deadline of like 30 seconds for a front page article. They're like, I got to get this in 5 minutes. Can I have a comment on this lawsuit? And I'm like, it's a 50-page lawsuit. I'm gonna.
Oh wait, get to the naked people.
Yeah. Okay.
Orgy story.
So I come back from this thing, and there's 18. I give a guy named David who says he needs the apartment for his brother and sister-in-law who are in town for a wedding, which seems reasonable. It seems like a typical Airbnb story. And I give him the keys, and I come back about 6 hours later to get a suitcase from the doorman, and there's a line of 18 guys in tracksuits, matching.
What color?
All different colors. The suits, or are you being a racist? Because the flannel. The suits were black. David, turns out it's his real name. He works for FedEx. So it's a weird package delivery. He's got that glowing headset that only like delivery guys have because their hands are full. And I'm like, what's going on? He goes, they're shutting us down. They're shutting it down. And I have Asperger's. By the way, I wanted to point that out. A lot of these tech CEOs, like in both worlds that I inhabit, of comedian and technology, it's just all Asperger's. Right? Like Seinfeld just came out and said he thinks he has a little bit of autism, and
then they shouldn't have feelings when we make fun of them.
The parents of kids with autism were like, "Oh, that's insensitive of you to say that you have autism." And I'm like, "Yeah, of course, that's what someone with autism would do, is do something insensitive." Check.
Orgy story.
Orgy story. Back to the orgy.
Bring it back to the orgy.
So I go into the super sitting in front of the building. He doesn't look happy. It's Friday night. I walk into the building. There's 10 guys, and they're carrying my furniture out this back door. Interesting choice of phrase. And my first thought, my mom was a decorator. My first thought was, wow, they've really opened up the space. And my second thought was, oh, I'm being robbed. And my third thought was, that should have been my first thought. And then I thought, this is a great business model, right? You rent a place for like $300 and you steal all the guy's furniture, fake name, done. And then I thought, I might get killed. Like, it should have been the first thing with a giant group of gangbangers in the nonviolent way. It turns out. And then all my pictures were flipped over. And I thought, oh, this is some sort of film shoot. Because they don't want to, they don't want any trademark issues. I've done some filming. And so, not that kind, unfortunately. And I was like, okay. And David goes, like, just give me a refund, we'll get out of here. And all my stuff's destroyed. The couch is like flipped over, torn apart, stained. There's a little electric drum set in the corner, guitars, everything's just bashed. Like people like not from New York were like, how do they do so much damage in an apartment? And I'm like, when you live in New York, like everything you've ever owned is in one room. They were like, his luxury studio. I'm like, it's luxury because I can't see my toilet from my pillow.
Wait, so the orgy had already occurred?
So there was like a 6-hour. So my friend John comes over, and because you've got like a one friend in the world you'd call if all of your furniture was piled in a back alley behind your building, and it looked like they were shooting a porn. And he comes over Friday night, and he's like, we got to Google this guy's phone number that you only get after the reservation. And on like Instagram and Twitter, it's the Black Dr. Ruth says, text this number to Twin Green to get into the XXX Freak Fest, the BBW XXX Freak Fest. None of the B stands for beautiful. Or Panty Raid. So it was like a twofer. And then on the flyer, it's like if you get in before 11, it's $20, and if after 11, it's $25. And I was like, it was an orgy with an early bird special. And I was still like, there's this Asperger thing. I was trying, like, how do they make the money? It was like $700 for the Airbnb rental because there's a cleaning fee, which really is a lowball for this incident. And my friends at MyClean came and like cleaned the thing, and it took a full day, and they threw everything out. But I was like, and John's like, we got to Google it. He's an orgy. And I call up Airbnb. It's like 4 a.m. I was like, I'm at a call center. There's nothing we could do for you. And I was like in the middle of New York. They're still like that. Like the thing about Airbnb versus hotel, like as a comic, is if there's a problem and it's 3 a.m, 4 a.m, you kind of wish you spent that extra $50 on a hotel that has another room. right? Because you think in the major cities where they do the bulk of their work, they'd actually have things set aside and actual staff that can run over at 2 in the morning and help you out. Free advice for Airbnb, okay. So I have a couple of other choice words. And so I wrote this open letter on Tumblr, which was the first time I'd ever used it. Big fan now. Dear Airbnb.tumblr.com. Dear Airbnb, no thank you for the XXX Freak Fest you put in my apartment. And I let my friends at Gawker and BuzzFeed know that I had written this thing. Jew in New York, friends at media places. Stereotype true. And then Gotham, and they actually, Gawker spent a lot of time, I was like Jordan Sargent, I think was the first person to really do it, spent a lot of time vetting the story, making sure it was true, and luckily I had taken photos.
Of what? What were the photos of?
They were clothed, and you're welcome. But the guys in the apartment, the stuff destroyed and broken, weird chalk marks on the door, like either they were counting people or it was some weird symbol wrappers and such on the floor.
Maybe they're going for a record.
Well, they rent for 2 days, so I feel like maybe they have just people who are really good at cleaning and reupholstering furniture. I guess would have been the.
I feel like people need their beers.
Yeah.
So there's
I have one final question.
Yeah.
Were you offended that they didn't want to look at your picture while they were having sex? That's really what it's about.
That's pretty good. Yeah.
Okay, thanks for coming. Great.